And we're going to dive into this story here about Bernie Sanders. And I have something to show you in reference to a flashback as well, in reference to Bernie Sanders. I told you a couple of nights ago that Bernie Sanders was on this press tour trying to encourage people to come out and support Joe Biden. He also spoke out against Cornel West's third party run. Bernie Sanders, I told you before, is a puppet, right? He's a puppet of the DNC. Well, now he's also been on Face the Nation, and he is telling people that if Joe Biden runs a progressive agenda, that Joe Biden will not only win, but he will win by a landslide. I'm going to pick apart some of the hypocrisy in this conversation that Bernie has, and then I'm going to take you to a flashback of something Bernie said in 2016 that's going to seem all too familiar, and it will tell you how this will go down. Let's go ahead and dive in.
And we now go to Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who is joining us from Burlington. Good morning, Senator Sanders. We appreciate you being here.
Morning, Bob.
Senator, President Biden is touting the latest jobs numbers, but your recent speech in New Hampshire painted a bleak picture of the nation's economic reality. When you met with President Biden at the White House in recent days, what exactly did you tell him, Senator? And did you warn him, like you warned in New Hampshire, that, quote, Democrats must reject the corporate wing of the party?
Well, Bob, what I have said publicly time and again is that President Biden and his administration have made some real progress in addressing issues that have not been dealt with in decades. We finally took on the pharmaceutical industry, and we're beginning to make some progress in lowering the cost of prescription drugs. A lot more has to be done. After years of talk, we finally invested in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, water system. Manufacturing is coming back in America.
Let me pause there for just a second. In reference to the pharma issue that Bernie is discussing about the prescription drug prices, remember a lot of the wins that came from that benefits people who are 65 and older. So just remember that, right? Especially when it came to the insulin issue. So they're still avoiding a large segment of the population there. And two, Bernie, let's not pretend like Joe Biden is the first person, or you were the first person to even talk about the issues with healthcare in this country, because we'll go back to, if I remember correctly, it's Teddy Roosevelt, I think, brought up universal healthcare. Universal healthcare has been talked about for decades in this country. So hold on one second, guys. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. Like the power just did something weird, but I'm back. Hold on one second. Okay. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I think the power went glitchy. Let me make sure I'm still here. Okay, yeah, I'm still here. Sorry. No, it wasn't you guys. Like the power like glitched. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. Oh, the fact that Teddy Roosevelt talked about that back then, and the fact that here we are in 2023 and we still don't have universal health care, that tells you something about this country and about corporate interests in electoral politics. Let's continue. Oh, I'm going to log back in again. Sorry. That's 102. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. The power went glitch for a second. Okay, there we go.
So I think we're making some progress, but everybody knows that for decades now, not just under Biden, not just under Trump, but for decades now, what we have seen in America is an economy in which the very, very wealthy are doing phenomenally well, while working families are struggling. Today, Bob, we don't talk about it much. We have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of the United States. This is way before Biden. But what we're seeing now is 60% of our people living paycheck to paycheck. We have a healthcare system which is totally broken. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We got 18 million households where people are spending 50% of their income trying to pay the rent or pay a mortgage. So we have some structural problems in America. The Biden administration has made some progress. We have got a long way to go. And what the Democratic Party has got to do is have the guts to take on corporate greed, which is unprecedented all over the economy. The people who own the large corporations are enjoying record-breaking profits. We got to create an economy that works for all, not just a few.
Now, here's where Bernie Sanders is just being ridiculous, right? Because Bernie Sanders knows that damn well that the Democrat politicians are not going to take on corporate greed because those are their donors. They're not going to take on Big Pharma because they're taking money from Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna. They're not going to take on, this issue with student debt the way that they should because they're taking money from Sally Mae. Like, Bernie Sanders knows that. So for Bernie even to make that statement, he's just exposing himself. He knows, and we know, because he taught us, and we've done our own research. He knows that the Democratic Party is corporate controlled. So why is he saying you guys got to have the guts to take on corporate greed? Because he knows they're not going to do it. This is all a game. This is all a game. Bernie knows the corporations aren't going to back down, and he knows the Democrat politicians are not going to back down. Bernie Sanders is playing people just like he did starting with 2016 when he first ran for president. Let's continue.
Senator, you met with the president. You discussed these issues. You just heard from Ambassador Haley. She was attacking Vice President Harris. Are Democrats doing enough to support Vice President Harris as she faces these kind of attacks?
Well, I think the issue is, are Democrats doing enough to win back a working class, which is leaving the Democratic Party? And what, in my view, Democrats have got to do is say, really, do you really want to vote for a Republican Party which wants to cut Social Security? We got to expand Social Security. Wants to cut Medicare? We have got to expand Medicare to include dental, hearing, and vision. We got a Republican Party out there that doesn't even recognize the reality of climate change. So I think, Bob, what this campaign should be about is a contrast between the ideas that work for the working families of this country and what the Republicans stand for, which is more tax breaks for billionaires and paying allegiance to the needs of corporate America, not ordinary Americans.
But
here's where Bernie Sanders is being disingenuous. Joe Biden continued some of Trump's tax breaks. Some of the tax breaks that Trump had for corporations, Joe Biden supported some of those tax breaks. He talks about the climate issue. Joe Biden approved the Willow Project. I don't remember Republicans approving the Willow Project. That happened under Joe Biden's administration. Yes, we need to do more in reference to climate. Yes, there's so many more things that we need to do in reference to the working class. But I remember sitting there and watching 8 senators, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent vote against the $15 minimum wage for people in this country. So the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. Now, again, to Bernie Sanders, to him to call out the Republican Party, which is the obvious, that's the obvious to the American people. Why doesn't Bernie Sanders call out the Democrats that are voting the same way the Republicans are voting? Because Bernie Sanders' job is to convince you that the Democratic Party is the right one and the way to go, and that the Democratic Party is doing the right thing and is doing nothing wrong. He'll just say, oh, there's a couple things that they need to do here and there, but for the most part, we're on the right track. That's Bernie Sanders' job. His job is not to get you to challenge the Democratic Party. His job is to get you to be submissive to the Democratic Party by convincing you that they're going to change when he knows that they're not, because they're corporate owned, and then having you submit yourself to them. That's his job.
Is the administration doing enough? I listened closely to your speech in New Hampshire. The administration's recently taken action on marijuana, for example, but should it do more with executive power? It's taken action on prescription drug negotiations with Medicare, but should it do more? I mean, you're out there saying they should be tougher.
Yes. Bob, the answer is yes, it should. Some of it can be done through executive orders. A lot can be done through legislation. And what I think has got to happen, this is my own view, is I think what the president has got to say is give me at least 50 Democrats in the Senate, give me control over the House of Representatives. And by 50 Democrats, I mean real Democrats, not corporate Democrats like Manchin and Sinema.
What the fuck? Real Democrats, not corporate Democrats like Manchin and Sinema. The majority of the Democrats in the House and the Senate are corporate. The majority are. So what's the real Democrat? What's the real Democrat when what? You're the outlier, Bernie. You're the outlier. Like that's the part that's hilarious to me. And to only call out Manchin and Sinema, it hasn't just been Manchin and Sinema. There were other Democrat senators, particularly the guy from Delaware, Chris Coons. I think his name is Chris Coons. The senator from Delaware voted against $15 minimum wage. It's not just Manchin and Sinema. Those, again, are the obvious people to call out. And I told you guys this before. Bernie Sanders does this a lot. He'll call out the obvious players, but he won't call out the ones that a lot of people don't know about.
And if you do that, within 2 or 3 months, we're going to reform healthcare to move it toward a system which guarantees healthcare to all people, not just huge profits for the insurance companies. We're going to lower the cost of prescription drugs so that we're not paying any more than the rest of the world. We're going to rebuild our economy to work for ordinary people. And I think that's got to be the message. Contrast a progressive agenda for working people versus a Republican agenda.
So there's Bernie Sanders admitting to you that the Democratic Party has a Republican agenda, basically, is what he's saying. An agenda for progressive agenda for the working people versus a Republican agenda. Bernie Sanders knows this party is not going to change and do this, especially next time for the election. He knows that. Bernie's not stupid. You see, they sent Bernie on this tour. They said, Bernie, you're going to be the puppet. You go out across the country and do like you usually do and convince the voters that Joe Biden is the way to go, that they got to support the Democratic Party. That's why you see him popping up everywhere. That's why he was just in New Hampshire. That's why you see him on Face the Nation. That's why you saw him on Meet the Press. That's why you see him doing all this stuff. This is Bernie Sanders' job. And for him to sit here and say that Joe Biden, just say to people, just give me 50 more Senate majority, Democrat Senate majority, and give me, a Democrat House majority. We had those things. How many times? We had those things. We've had it under multiple Democrat presidents. We had the majority in the House when Joe Biden was elected. They still didn't pass shit for the working class people, for the most part, to speak. Some of the things that, in reference to working class people, some of the things that Joe Biden can do, he can do by executive order. When it came to canceling student loan debt, Joe Biden could have done that by executive order. So this is Bernie Sanders carrying weight and water for the Democratic Party again. Instead of telling the American people, here are the things that Joe Biden can do right now by executive order. Why hasn't Joe Biden decriminalized marijuana federally? Why hasn't he? That's something he can do by executive order. Why? Because Joe Biden is still in bed with the police state. Because if you do that, what happens to the police in this country? Now they can't just stop people and say, I smelled weed in the car. This is a mess.
Senator, I know you don't like to talk politics, but you're the one who went to New Hampshire, an early primary state you've done very well in over the years. You support President Biden 100%. You've made that clear. But for any reason, if President Biden decides not to seek the Democratic nomination, is a run by Senator Sanders for the nomination on the table next year?
Bob, I think we spend too much time speculating. I think President Biden is going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And I think if he runs on a strong progressive agenda, he's not only going to win, he's going to win by a strong vote. And I'll tell you why.
Let's pause there. So there it is, folks. Bernie Sanders says if Joe Biden runs on a strong progressive agenda, he's going to win and win by landslide. Let me tell you why that is a ridiculous statement from Bernie. You already have candidates that are running on a progressive agenda. So it's just, Why does Bernie Sanders try to convince you that they're going to try to convince Joe Biden to run a progressive agenda when you already have candidates running on a progressive agenda? If Bernie Sanders had a spine, he would tell you to support the progressive candidates that are already running. If Bernie Sanders had a small spine, he would tell you support Marianne Williamson. She's running through the Democratic Party on progressive agenda. Now, I don't agree with Marianne's position on Israel and Ukraine, but if Bernie had a small spine, he'd do that. But if Bernie had a huge spine, he would tell you to support Cornel West, who is also running on a progressive agenda, who has the correct issue or the correct position in reference to Israel and Palestine. And he has the guts to run outside of this two-party system because he knows that both parties are corporate, and he saw what happened to me. But Bernie Sanders isn't going to do that because, again, his job is to convince you that the Democratic Party is going to change. And when they don't, he gets you to be submissive to the party anyway because of the dangers of Donald Trump. You see why that don't make no sense? It's just like, if I walk into the kitchen and I'm going to make me a smoothie, which is something I do every day. I walk into the kitchen, I'm going to make myself the smoothie. And I'm looking and I'm like, man, I need spinach to put in my smoothie. I have spinach in the refrigerator that is fresh and ready to go. I have spinach fresh and ready to go in the refrigerator. That's like me not using the spinach that's already there and me saying, I'm going to go to the grocery store and get some new spinach. That doesn't make any sense. You already have those progressive. So why would Bernie Sanders do that? He would only do that because Bernie Sanders is just as much a part of the same establishment that he has tried to convince you that he's not a part of, that he tells you to push back and fight back against. Because if he was not a part of that Democrat establishment, I don't care if he's a registered independent. If he was not a part of that Democrat establishment, Bernie Sanders would have the spine and the guts to tell you to walk away from the Democratic Party, support Cornel West because he's got the right progressive agenda if you are progressive and you believe in those issues. He's just a part of the establishment.
Because when you look at a Republican Party, it's not only that you have a president, a former president who has been impeached twice, indicted 4 times. These are people who deny women in this country the right to control their own bodies. Really? Is that where we are in 2023? Not recognizing the reality of climate change, wanting more tax breaks for billionaires? That's what their agenda is. So I think that in any kind of serious campaign, President Biden and the Democrats will do quite well against that reactionary agenda.
What do you
hear this?
You say, Senator, though, to some of your longtime supporters who are frustrated because they don't believe the Biden administration's done enough? They may not share your view of how things have gone, and they're thinking about Cornel West or they're thinking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. What's your message to them as they drift toward those others?
Well, my message to them is that we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history.
The same message he told us years ago. He uses this line every time. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. Same message. This is an unprecedented time in American history. This is the most important election of our lifetime, folks, for the 20th time in a row.
Donald Trump is not only a pathological liar, has not only helped wage an insurrection, if you like, to prevent President Biden from taking office.
Joe Biden is also a pathological liar. Joe Biden's going around telling people that he marched during the civil rights movement. He didn't. Bernie did. He's going around telling people he's going around telling people he was around with Nelson Mandela. Joe Biden is a pathological liar as well. But Bernie Sanders isn't going to tell you that.
Not only is denying American democracy, moving against American democracy. So I think at this moment, Bob, We have got to bring the progressive community together.
So Bernie Sanders' response to what's left of his support of his base is Trump is a pathological liar. We got to protect democracy. Vote for Joe Biden. That's all you got? That's it?
You say, you know what? We're going to fight for a progressive agenda, but we cannot have 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House.
We're going to fight for a progressive agenda. So Joe Biden took office 2021. Why do you have to fight for it? Think about this, guys. Why does Bernie Sanders have to fight for a progressive agenda? If Joe Biden is on the side of the workers and he really cares about the working class in this country, Mr. I'm Union Joe. I've always supported unions. Why does he need to be convinced?
Do you worry about the progressive vote staying home?
I think if the Democrats come up with a strong agenda that speaks to the needs of senior citizens in this country, and that means raising Social Security benefits, expanding Medicare. If we speak to the needs of young people, and that is having a lot to do with student debt, if we demand that the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes, if we come up with a progressive agenda, I think we're going to win and win big. And when we win big, we have to make it clear that we stand with the working class of this country against the kind of corporate greed that we now see.
So I call BS because they do not stand with the working class people. Again, remember who tore down the railroad workers trying to go into a strike? Who prevented that? The squad members, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, and Joe Biden supported it. He says we have to have a progressive agenda. Just because you have an agenda doesn't mean they actually are going to get those things done or they want to get those things done. How many times have you gone to meetings and there's an agenda in the meeting and you don't get through all the items on the list, or you get through all the items on the list? And next is to do the task. Who's going to actually do these tasks? And those items on the list still are not accomplished. They're not implemented. They're not done. You can have an agenda. Just because you have an agenda doesn't mean it's actually going to be done. Politicians have had agendas for years. But I want to show you, because Bernie has done this before. Now I want to take you back 6 years ago. 2016, actually more than 6 years ago. This video was uploaded 6 years ago. But I want to take you back to 2016 when Bernie Sanders was on Morning Joe. And this is when he's already out of the race. And it's now Hillary versus Donald Trump. You've heard this before. Listen to this message from Bernie Sanders.
Clinton doing better.
Well, what I meant to say in terms of Trump and what I said.
Let me go back just a little bit. She's asking him, why isn't Hillary Clinton doing better? This was in the polls.
Is that he understands some things, able to connect with it. There's a lot of angst, pain, and hurt in this country. And he's saying, I understand what you're saying. So let me flip the question and take it a step further. Why isn't Hillary Clinton doing better?
Well, what I meant to say in terms of Trump and what I said is people are hurting in this country.
Yeah.
And the media has got to recognize it, and politicians have got to recognize it. People.
So do you guys see any similarities so far? We're not done yet. People are hurting in this country. Okay. This was 2016. I'm just showing you nothing has changed.
Watching the show today are worried about how they're going to pay their electric bill. They're worried about their children being able to go to college or paying off their student debt. They can't make it on $10 an hour. They're seeing their jobs go to China and Mexico, and they are angry and they're frustrated. And what Trump does is, okay, I see those problems, and really the cause of the problems is Muslims. The cause of the problems are Mexicans, and he is dividing us up. And the cornerstone of his campaign is bigotry, and I'm going to do everything I can to oppose that. What we have got to do, it seems to me, Mika, when we look at this presidential campaign, I understand people are not enamored with Trump, they're not enamored with Clinton, they weren't enamored with me. But what you got to do is look at the issues. If you are a working person, do you really think that billionaires need a large tax break, which is what Trump is proposing? If you are an ordinary American who listens to science, do you think it's a good idea that a president of the United States rejects science and says that climate change is a hoax when the scientists are telling us it's the great global crisis that we face?
Let's talk about the overt covert issue. So obviously, as I've said before, when you talk about the climate issue, yes, Donald Trump was overt in reference to the climate issue, saying we're bringing back plastic straws. Who cares? Or says that he doesn't believe in climate change. But here we are under a Biden presidency, and Joe Biden said that he would not issue any new drilling permits. Here we are with new drilling permits. Here we are with Joe Biden giving breaks to fossil fuel companies. Yes, he had climate legislation, but in that legislation, he also gave breaks to the fossil fuel companies. That's why people like Joe Manchin approved it. That's why people like Joe Manchin voted for it. So again, one is overt and one is covert, but they both doing the bidding of what works for the corporations. And that's what people really have to understand. Bernie points out the obvious. He points out the covert. Bernie doesn't point, the overt. Bernie does not point out the covert. Let's continue.
So I think that if you look at the issues, raising the minimum wage, rebuilding our infrastructure, expanding healthcare, not cutting healthcare as Trump wants to do, Clinton by far is the superior candidate.
Joe, jump in.
Bernie, of course, you get no fight from Mika and a lot of people around the sets with everything that you just said. But if bigotry is the cornerstone of his campaign, as a lot of Americans, a lot of Democrats, a lot of reporters believe, why is Hillary Clinton having so much trouble with millennials, a group that in the Democratic side, you were beloved with millennials? Why are they splitting more towards Trump than they did towards? We're having a hard time getting our arms around it. What is it?
So listen to this, guys. This is important. He's asking, why is it that Hillary's struggling with millennials? Why is it so close? They were talking about the polling numbers at this point in time. Listen to what Bernie Sanders says. This is very important. Now think about what he just mentioned, that whole speech about people struggling in this country, yada, yada. Now listen to Bernie's response to that question.
Why were you able to connect so well with millennials, and why is Hillary so bad at connecting with millennials?
Joe, that's a fair question, and I honestly don't know the answer.
That's a damn lie. See, this is why I like to go back and play these older clips just to show you guys we've been gaslit all along. Listen to this. Now, Bernie say he don't know.
Splitting more towards Trump than they did towards. We're having a hard time getting our arms around it. What is it? Why were you able to connect so well with millennials, and why is Hillary so bad at connecting with millennials?
Joe, that's a fair question, and I honestly don't know the answer.
Okay, so Bernie Sanders just told you he doesn't know the answer as to why he was able to connect with millennials and Hillary Clinton was struggling to do so at that point in time. After he just gave you a big old speech about how people were struggling because of student loan debt, right? The prices, people were dealing with the medical costs, healthcare costs in this country. Bernie Sanders just sat up there and lied back then. Now, I didn't catch this during this time. These are the things I wish I would have paid closer attention to. But Bernie Sanders knew exactly why millennials were not appealing to Hillary Clinton, because of the things that he just told you, because she was not being vocal towards the working class. The fact that Hillary Clinton decided to look over the Rust Belt, the fact that she talked down to the working class people and felt like she just had an in because she already had it in with Goldman Sachs. She already had it in with her colleagues in the House and the Senate. She had already been selected prior to her run in 2016. So she felt like she didn't really have to speak to the working class people. She didn't really have to speak to young people. But Bernie Sanders just sat right there and gaslight the entire audience and told people that he doesn't know why millennials are not appealing to Hillary Clinton. Let's continue.
But this is what I do know. In politics, too much we look at personality. We like you, we don't like you. And I think we got to back away from that and say, We're not looking at Trump or Clinton. We're looking at the needs of the American people. And if you just go down the list in terms of experience, but also in terms of views on the issue. I worked with Clinton, Joe, at the end of the campaign on higher education. And what we concluded, and she is public on this, and will make it happen, is that every family in America of 125,000 or less, that's 83% of our people, will be able to send their kids to a public college or university tuition free. You know what, Joe? That's pretty good. That is pretty damn good. Yeah. Clinton wants to raise taxes on the rich at a time of massive income and wealth inequality. Trump wants to give huge tax breaks to billionaires. That's wrong. So
I do not believe that Hillary Clinton was ever really going to raise taxes on the rich, so to speak. Again, those are her donors. Those are her friends. Now we're going to go to another clip here from the same interview that I also think is very telling. Or did I start at that piece yet? Or, oh yeah, let me go back to that. Oh yeah, I didn't finish that part. Sorry. I went into that clip, so I don't need that one. So listen to this still. Let me add this back.
I would just simply say to the millennials, to anybody else, look at the issues. Don't get hung up on Trump's kids or whatever the story of the birther issue. Stay focused on the issues of relevance to your life. I think Clinton is far and away the superior candidate.
So if you stay focused on the issues that are relevant and important to your life, why are you telling people today to support Joe Biden? Because the issues that are relevant and important to people's life, that would be Cornel West's campaign. So Bernie Sanders, like, he don't really care about the policies, so to speak. He's just there to support the Democratic Party and to try to trick young people that the Democratic Party is changing for them and to funnel in the next generation of Democrat supporters. Now, listen to this piece here. We're going to go to these guys, these gentlemen here. And this is where the Jill Stein issue is brought up. And there's something I want to show you in reference to this chart that they show.
Number of young voters, like a third, are voting for third-party candidates, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, they don't remember Ralph Nader, right? They don't remember the effect that can have on a general election with the two-party candidates. So what?
They still keep bringing up Ralph Nader, and it's just hilarious to me. I want to show you this before they continue. Look at this. 2016 general election among voters under 30. 31% Hillary Clinton. 26% Gary Johnson. We're going to come back to Gary. 26% Donald Trump. 10% Jill Stein. Gary Johnson had 26% support at this point in time. And Gary Johnson, as a libertarian, his race was actually a big deal. Till this day, if you look it up, till this day, Gary Johnson had the most successful race as a libertarian presidential candidate to date. But they never mention him. They never bring this guy up when they talk about spoilers. I don't hear Republicans saying, even back then, I didn't hear Republicans saying, oh no, Gary Johnson is the spoiler. I didn't hear people saying, oh no, Gary Johnson, you're going to stop Donald Trump. But Democratic Party constantly focused on this 10% here from Jill Stein among the younger people. Do you see the comparison here, guys? Let them continue.
What is your pitch to them?
Good. I mean, that's a very good question. And I think the answer is, look, I was a third-party candidate. I began my career running as a third party, getting 2% of the vote. And then I got 1% of the vote. So I know a little bit about third party. I'm the longest-serving independent in the history of the U.S. Congress. But I think that before you cast a protest vote, because either Clinton or Trump will become president, think hard about it.
See that? Before you cast a protest vote.
This is not a governor's race. It's not a state legislative race. This is the presidency of the United States. And I would say to those people out there who are thinking of the protest vote, think about what the country looks like and whether you're comfortable of 4 years of a Trump presidency. And I would suggest to those people, let us elect Hillary Clinton as president. And the day after, let us mobilize millions of people around the progressive agenda, which, by the way, was passed, as you know, in the Democratic platform. We worked very hard on that, the most progressive platform in the history of American politics, and say to Secretary Clinton, let us work together to implement that platform. That's
He's still saying the same thing now. See how nothing has changed? Same thing now. Go ahead, vote for Hillary Clinton. And then after she's elected, we'll rally behind her and get her to push. We'll push Hillary Clinton left to get her to push these and pass these progressive policies. Same thing with Joe Biden. Go ahead and vote for Joe Biden. And we're going to push Joe Biden left. You see how this doesn't change? This is who Bernie Sanders is. He's never really going to be this revolutionary that he claimed he was in terms of a political revolution. How you gonna have a political revolution and you tell people to just go ahead and vote for your opponent that you told to push back against because they're corporate? So how are you gonna fight corporate greed if you have a base of supporters out there that you're telling to go ahead and support the candidate with the corporate greed? You can't. And Bernie Sanders knows that. He said we got to mobilize around what? Where was the mobilization? Where was the mobilization? Bernie, if I lose, I'll be outside with my people. What happened to that? None of those things happened. So you're going to hear more of this type of rhetoric from Bernie Sanders. Again, that was 2016. He's still saying the same thing. Different presidential candidate, same message from Bernie Sanders. Every time you try to take a step forward to progressivism or some type of political revolution, a real one, Bernie Sanders is always going to be just a step behind you to pull you back to keep things just the way they are.